Now you ask me, am I sorry? No. No, not at all. He chose to fight it. And I was told by one who was there, the dragon was so old, and the hero even older, that it was a battle in name alone. It carried on till one died of a heart attack, and the other one just slunk into the earth, worn out by it all. But then he was a hero, wasn't he? Me and Beowulf, we were nothing. Nothing. When our masters told us we were nothing. I think that's what made me first go to the mounds. I remember, you see, when I was a boy, I went to those mounds, and I used to play with them, till my parents stopped me, telling me that the thunder that I always heard was the dragon snoring. But I was a fine sceptical chap and laughed, I remember it well. But when I was 10 and playing there, I remember I appeared under one of the great boulders that lie on the top of the mound, where people don't go. But then, you see, it was once a stone circle of my sort. And I looked then, and it seemed to me there was something like a well under that stone. But then I was called away and thought nothing more of it. Until I met Beowulf. Oh, that was up country. Tried to pick my pockets, the scoundrel. Well, I had picked his already. So he only took his own property back. And then I had the watch on him. They fined him and gave me the money. So I robbed him twice and he only robbed me the once. But the second robbery, it was done by the state, wasn't it? So it didn't count. We became friends after that. He stood me a beer. So I must have robbed him a third time. And we yarned about our lives and some things we made, some things... I expect that sometimes one of us told the truth. Well, as the night went on and we both got drunker and drunker, I suddenly remembered about that Moel, and I told him about it. That I knew an entrance to a buried treasure. I didn't think anything more of it. Well, you wouldn't, would you? But then he double took, and he described the land I came from, flat land it were, where the sea and the land meet, and you're never sure where one begins and the other ends. And outside there are islands. Now they're made of rock. And these mounds were on one of the islands, connected by the mainland, I should have said, by a peninsula. Now at high tide became an island. And when he told me that, and I agreed, that was what it was like, he said, well, don't you know? In olden days, our people buried a treasure there. Before the great people came across the ocean, they buried treasure there in those mounds. It's there for all to take. For all to take. Now, I didn't mention what my father had said, that there was something in the tunnels. That was a long time ago. My father was telling lies, and to be honest with you, I assumed that Beowulf was. But he remembered it the next morning and asked me to show him the well. Wow, it was a long way. We worked as a fishing boat, I remember. Ooh, it was cold. And I came at last home. Well, nobody recognised me. I didn't want them to. Not after the last time. And we slunk onto the island at that low tide that is after sunset. Came up to the mounds, and we looked at the dark, but of course could see nothing. So I had to wait for a cold, cold sunrise. It was an October day, sometime before Samhain. It took me a while to find the stone, and then I showed Beowulf what I had seen as a child, that you could pull away some of the stones, and if you looked in, there was a drop, a well, that seemed to go vertically down, but you couldn't see how far. When he got out a spear that he always carried with him, strapped on his back it were, and very carefully we lifted up the big stone. It was lighter than you might have thought. Oh, that was strange. And we revealed, with a lot of pushing and pulling, a hole about 2 feet by 2 feet it was. And I put down a lantern. I always carried a lantern in their days. And we saw that the well wasn't at all deep, but that running off it, there was something that looked like an earthenware passage. But darkness came from the hole. It was like the night hadn't lifted there in 100 years. And dust. Beowulf was down it, but I didn't like the smell. There was something down there I knew that shouldn't be. That shouldn't be. But he laughed at me and said he needed a lantern. So I took out my dagger, I lifted up the lantern and I dropped down with him. And I don't think I'll ever forget the walk down. Down we went. Down, down, straight down. Not going about at all. It felt like a mile. Realistically, perhaps it was as little as 100 yards in the pitch. Before we saw ahead of us a red glow. And it started to feel warmer. And then there was a tinkling sound, like something moving in its sleep on a golden bed. And both of us now were gripped as if by some kind of horror. We couldn't turn back if we tried. Our feet took us down, 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 until at last we came to a great door, and I lifted up my lantern, but there was no need, for it shone by a red light. The kind of light a fire makes just before it dies in the dark. An old twisted turny thing, like a hawthorn bush, but put on its side and set alight, burning, smouldering with old flame. And a head that could have been made of stone and metal, save it was breathing, slow and sure. Well, Beowulf pointed, and up near the dragon, for that was what it was, I saw it was a cup, made clearly of gold. Well, Beowulf climbed up the mound, which was not made of gold as much as I had first thought. The gold was just at the top. It was mostly loose clay. And getting near the top, he came at last to the layer of gold coins, and reaching beyond it, to the cup. And he threw the cup down to me, and I caught it. But there was something in the rush of the air. I don't know what. I think it started a bat. Just as Beowulf started to carefully climb down the clay slope. Well, I think a bat hit him. Suddenly he slipped and fell. And then we heard it. Moving. A sound. Scale on metal. And I felt its eye look down. I clutched the cup and ran up the passage as fast as I could, running hard, turning back after 20 yards to look for Beowulf. But he wasn't there. There was only a sound, like a muffled scream, and a sound that gets between me and my sleep. Jaws biting fast on something that was moving. My heart leapt into my mouth. My stomach felt like lead, but I knew I had to go back and see. So carefully I crept towards the entrance. And there was the great jaws flashing down and down, sharp teeth red, yellow teeth with age, dyed scarlet with young blood. When I saw that, I ran. I think I must have made a noise because suddenly the jaws were after me. I could feel them behind me, red hot, the flame. I almost fell. But clutching the cup in front of me, I caught myself, turned a somersault and ran. After a while, I think the creature couldn't fit in the tunnels. There was a great bolt of flame just as I looked back to see how far away it was. It caught me in the face, and I fell back badly burnt under the stars. Blameless, I think you'll agree. Oh yes, I did run away. I didn't tell Beowulf the Lord what was happening, but then why should I? Let him find out, the hero that he was, at his own times. He can avenge Beowulf. I am going north. I'm going to sell this cup to the king of the northern folk and retire at last. And try to forget Beowulf, I suppose, if I can.